I decided to cut my cloth in basically a 12-inch by 12-inch, just the good basic napkins. Some are larger, some are small. Cut 2 of them. I decided to use the same fabric for the top and the bottom of my napkin, but if you want them to have different colors, of course, just alternate which colors you want. And when you cut them, lay them on top of each other, and I always start by pinning one in the middle, and then I start with the corners and pin. I pin sometimes more, sometimes less, just whatever you're most comfortable with. And it's okay if you have corners or edges like this that don't exactly match up. It's going to be fine. And if you also noticed, I have the fabric right side together. That means this is the right side, and you put them together. So it's wrong side out. What you're going to do, I'm going to show you how to do a corner on a napkin, or this is what we're going to practice later on when we make a pillow. You can make a pillow from a square and those sort of things. And I just start about halfway down or somewhere around in there on one of my sides. Now I use the edge of my cloth and I line it up with the edge of my foot. It just gives me a good way to judge if I am staying straight or not. What you're going to do, go ahead and start, back stitch, and keep going. Alright, if you noticed, I did not pull it. The machine did it itself, but I did use my hands to guide it. And make sure the heads of your pins don't get under here, because it might cause the needle to break sometimes, so be careful with that. Now, if you also noticed, my needle ended up inside of my cloth. If it's not, then you can turn the wheel on the side of your machine if you need your needle to go up and down. But you want your needle inside of there, and you're going to lift up your foot, and all you're going to do for a corner is turn it 90 degrees, put your foot back down, and keep sewing all the way to the next corner, turn, and keep going. Alright, I'm going to stitch around my last corner, and I'm wanting, it's hard to see because I used white thread, but I started right here. We're wanting to stop and give several inches to be able to turn our napkin right side out. So I'm going to stop, and I've got to turn because my needle ended up in the air, so I'm going to turn with my needle inside my cloth, lift my feet, turn, put it back down, and I'm ready to keep sewing just a little bit more. And be careful, don't close it all the way up. Okay. Now I'm gonna, and back stitch, because you're gonna stop for a little while. Lift your feet up and just cut your thread. And what you're gonna need to do is take your pins out, and now what you're going to be left with is an opening, not too big. Be very careful, and you just have to do this whatever way works best for you, and you're going to start grabbing and pulling. If I could make a suggestion that my teacher taught me, to make your corners to have that nice 90-degree angle, cut some of the extra fabric off in the corners. And be careful, don't cut where the thread is, but you can cut right up close to it and it'd be okay. And like you see, my fabrics don't match up perfectly. That's going to be fine when you turn it the other direction. Okay, and now I'm going to find my opening, and I'm just going to start grabbing and pulling. And be careful, you've back stitched on both ends of the opening, so it should be fine, but just still be careful and gentle as much as you can. Okay, and when you first pull it out, it's not going to look pretty. It's not going to look nice. The corners won't be popped out. That's okay. Just pull them as good as you can just to get them popped out. And you're not going to get them perfect. I'm going to teach you a trick that I use that helps pop them out a little better. When you have this, you end up with corners that look like that. That's not what you want, obviously. A good thing to do, and you have to be careful if you use this. You can get some sort of long, rounded edge stick or something, but if you can do it carefully, most of the time I just grab my scissors because they're right beside me, and without pushing too hard, I just carefully work my corners out until they're nice and at a better 90-degree angle. Just don't poke too hard. There we go. And it poked out nice and neat and even. And just kind of go all the way around all of your corners, just like that. Good. That one popped out nice and neat. Let's do 2 more. Just carefully guide your scissors along that seam or whatever tool you're using to help pop the nice 90-degree angles of the corners out. And with you cutting that extra fabric, it's going to let it actually pop very nicely into place. And then one last one. Sometimes you got to work them a little bit. There we go. Okay. And what you're going to be left with is your napkin, and it's going to be very poofed up and not look like your average napkin. That's okay. That's where your iron comes into place. So I would take your iron and just iron and pull down as much as you can and iron it flat just the way you want it. And your opening, this is where you're going to need to hand stitch. And I'm going to take one of my needles, and I'm going to use white thread since it matches fairly well with my fabric. And I'm afraid I cut way too much thread. It's just a bad habit. You would think I would learn not to. Thread your needle. And then what you're going to need to do, I like to use double thread when I'm seaming these up. I'm sometimes afraid that last little bit of opening will come undone. Tie a knot on the end. I usually tie 2 or 3 knots, whatever you think would be good to hold it. Sometimes it's hard to get your knots to line up just right. There we go. And you have your needle at the end. I just start on the inside. That way my knot isn't there. Wherever you left off, and just pull it up. Now I've got an extra tail. You can just cut that off. It doesn't matter even if you cut right up to the line. It's not going to hurt it. And all you're going to do to finish it is pull it to where the edges match the other edges, and you are just going to hand stitch edge to edge just like that, and you're stitched the whole way over until you have it sewn up just like that. And you're going to have a little seam right there where you're going to see the thread, and that's what you want. And that is your cloth napkin.